Drum Corps International is coming up on its 50th anniversary, but really the history of Drum Corps predates that. Today, we are talking with, I would say, a Drum Corps icon and one of the most well-known voices in Drum Corps. That's all today on PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Take Note. I am very excited for this one. I am thrilled to be joined here today by Steve Rondinaro. If you follow Drum Corps International, I would dare say legendary, as this is the voice. You know, sometimes they say, the voice of DCI is Brant Crocker when you're in the stadium. To me, as somebody who has watched the broadcast for so many years, Steve Rondinaro is the voice of DCI. And I'm thrilled to have him join us today. Steve, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Less desirably, I suppose I'm the face as well from the broadcast sense of things. And legendary just means I've been around a long time.
Oh, okay. That's your definition. We'll agree to disagree. So I want to start by talking a little. You have been, I guess this plays into a legendary comment, you have been doing the DCI broadcast for decades now. You've worked in television news. You have worked in television production, kind of outside of the news world. I think it's just this fascinating I don't want to say collision, but these lines have crossed. This Drum Corps world and the broadcasting world have crossed. Can you kind of give us the summation of, what was your Drum Corps background, and then how that kind of moved into, the role that we know you for?
I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world to be able to combine a profession that I love with a hobby, an avocation, a lifelong pursuit that I love. 1964, Little Watkins Glen, New York, three guys, Chuck Calhoun, Vern Alling, and Carl Isley, decided we needed a drum and bugle corps to keep the boys off the streets. So at the age of 9 that fall, I guess maybe age 10, I think, we were in the Legion Hall upstairs, and they pull out one of these instruments, the likes of which I'd never seen before. Now, I'd grown up, my dad's a trombone player. He had me blowing on a horn before I could walk, so I was familiar with that. But this thing I'd never seen before, it had this horizontal valve, and okay, boys, these are the bugles we're going to be getting. Oh, cool. So that's how we started. They were teaching us basics upstairs on the upper floor of the Legion Hall. I'm amazed that didn't fall down with all those little feet up there going left, right, left, right. 1965, we did our first parade, Memorial Day, down Franklin Street, the main street of Watkins Glen, New York. And you'd have thought we were the New York Yankees out there after the World Series. It was, we just felt 8 feet tall, and the parents were out there with tears in their eyes, and this thing had come to a reality in this little town. And we just grew it from there. And I got consumed by it. I was in the band throughout all my school years, but we didn't march. Oh. Mr. Bailey, our band director, was pretty far along in his career, and he always liked to say that, if I wanted to be a gym teacher, I would have been. I'm a music teacher, so I'm going to focus on playing music and leave the physical part to somebody else. So we never marched. Other bands in upstate New York did, and we got our fix through that drum and bugle corps that God, we were awful. We were terrible. We went to our first state competition and finished next to last. We went back the next year, finished next to last. And then the corps that had finished last place went and cheated and got better on us. So we finished dead last the third year with a 20.33, and some guy yelling from the stadium stands, "Get him off the field." Well, that stuck with us. And it stuck with our adult leadership, and they decided things had to change, and got new instrumentation, got some new instruction, and the little awful squires now started to get a lot better, to the point where we just missed The DCI top 12 in 1975 were just a few tenths behind the Troopers in 13th place. And we finally won that New York State championship. We went from worst to first, and we're 4 years running state champions. And that was a pretty big deal. Again, this is a town of 2,700 people then in a county of 13,000 in a pretty darn big, highly populated state. So that drum corps thing that was part of my very marrow. I got a job at the local radio station at the age of 15 in Watkins Glen. And, you know, I'd work sign off after school or come in on weekends and sign it on. And along the way, I talked the owner into letting me do a Squires report once a week, update on the drum corps. So now even back then, I'm starting to marry the two. It's starting to come together. And that, you know, that was before the days of cell phones. So if we're on the road with the corps and we're in a competition, everybody wants to know how we did. Well, they tune in the radio station and we'd have the info for them. So that was pretty big stuff back then. So all that is fusing together, and I stayed with that corps till I aged out. So 10, 11 years. Was helping to run the corps my last year as a marching member in 75, which was an experience, and then stayed on as a volunteer director / manager through the 79 season. 76, I graduate college, get an internship in Rochester, New York, go into my TV career, still running the Squires. And then 79 got a job in Miami and headed down there to do TV news. So I kind of had to leave the Squires behind. Now I go to this city where I don't know a soul. I'm going from market 63 or something to 13th biggest market in the country. It was a little scary stuff for a small town New York kid. And I get a call from the DCI office, and it's Don Whiteley, and said, hey, you know, there's a drum corps down there that's got some problems, and it would be really great if you could help them out. I was the Florida Vanguards, and they had placed 24th the year before, but they pretty much mortgaged everything to do that. So I ended up inheriting the Florida Vanguards, which was kind of a train wreck on wheels at that point. And we decided if we were going to save any kind of drum corps activity, we'd tear it down and start from the beginning. And we created the Florida Wave from that. And the Wave had a great ride. We went with a theme of lightly Latin and tastefully tropical. Won the DCI Class A. In fact, I think we set a record for performances in Atlanta that year, having moved our way through the Class A prelims and then winning and then qualifying for the open class prelims. Basically, we performed every night at championship week, which was a thrill. And the Wave was another great experience that allowed hundreds of kids to have an experience they wouldn't have had otherwise. In the midst of all that, I mentioned that name, Don Whiteley. He was both a blessing and a vexation in my life. He got me into that thing in Miami that a sane person probably would have declined, but he's also the guy that got me started on DCI television. The first adventure I had was at the championships in Denver in 1976. The ABC station there that Whiteley had an affiliation with was a sponsor, local media sponsor, and they sent a live truck out to do a shot, I think, on finals night. Well, they didn't send a reporter. And Whiteley said, hey, go talk to them on TV. I've never done a live shot in my life. Rochester, New York, we didn't have live trucks yet. I said, well, what are you needing me to do? He said, just talk about the event. I said, okay, great. Went out, did it, worked well. They were happy. He was happy. Next year, we decided we're going to, well, this is right in your neck of the woods. We did DCI East out of Allentown live for a couple of years in the late 70s on a consortium of PBS stations in that part of the state. So it would have been, I guess, 77, 78. And there was a weather lady from KYW in Philadelphia, Carol Erickson. She and I were teamed to do the DCI East out of Allentown live. First live TV for me with Drum Corps International. A year after that, they decided to do the show in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on Canadian TV. So I went up there and did that for them. So a couple of years in the minors, Whiteley decided I'm ready for the majors. 79 was my first year to do the DCI World Championship live on PBS. 5 hours from the cool and airy confines of Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama, under studio lights in the dead of August outside in the bleachers, with some guy named Maynard Ferguson.
Yeah.
You might have heard of him as my co-host. I got to tell you, that was a thrill. And I will admit to sneaking peeks at his lip on occasion to see if it had any discernible superhuman qualities. Maynard was great though. And I got into a discussion about breathing for brass playing with him, and holy moly, pretty soon I'm knee deep in yoga and all these other principles that he applied. And of course with Maynard, it was all about the air, all about the airflow. And boy, what a thrill. So we're about halfway through that 5-hour live show, and he's just digging it. He is grooving on these drum corps, and styles were so different and diverse back then. And at one point, I pull a 2-valve soprano out from behind the desk. I said, Maynard, you ever get a chance to check one of these out up close? So he takes the horn and, hey, man, dig this thing. Said, I don't know what to do with his third finger, because back then we were playing the GF horns with 2 valves. So he said, I wonder what this sounds like. I said, well, heck, you're Maynard Ferguson. Give it a try. Now, this is all live on PBS. Maynard takes that thing and he starts wailing on it. And about 5,000 people in the stands turn around and do one of these and start going bananas because Maynard Ferguson's wailing on a bugle. That was a lot of fun, that show. Next year it was Rita Moreno. What a wonderful lady. And I've done it every year since with any number of people, and it's a highlight of my year. Of anything that I do, TV, news. The only thing that even came close was the return to flight of the space shuttle after the Challenger disaster. But being able to do what I do is a gift.
Yeah, I was going to say, after Miami, you went to Orlando, and you were at WESH in Orlando. Yeah. So for Pennsylvanians, that's a sister station to WTAE in Pittsburgh and WGAL in Harrisburg. And I think that's kind of, when I came more into paying attention to things and knowing you in that market and just the ability, the things that you would have seen in that market from covering the space program had to just be an absolutely incredible piece of your career.
Well, that was my passion, covering space. I was a kid that grew up watching us land on the moon, and what kid didn't want to be an astronaut watching that? Well, I knew that was never going to happen, but I thought Walter Cronkite had a pretty cool job being there in the broadcast booth for all those launches. And eventually I got to do that on a local level. That's one of the reasons why I went from Miami to Orlando, was the Orlando stations treated it like a huge lead story local news event, which it was, because the Kennedy Space Center is part of our local coverage area. So the station had changed ownership. When I got hired, I was one of the initial hires of the new owners, and they were committed to space coverage. And I said, okay, I'm your guy, I'm coming. And my gosh, I probably did, 20, 30 shuttle launches live on TV, and landings, and rocket missions, and all kinds of things. Mark, I'm blessed to have been able to meet most of the heroes of my youth through the TV news business. I met every Mercury 7 astronaut save one, Gus Grissom, who died in that pad fire. John Glenn became a personal acquaintance, a wonderful human being. And also some athletes. My favorite, Brooks Robinson, became a family friend. So I was blessed in that regard in my TV news career to see things and do things that people don't get to see and do, as a rule, and meet people in that same way. I irritated a couple of presidents and had lunch with Ronald Reagan at the White House, and I've had some adventures.
Yeah, I think there's a book in here somewhere.
That's what my aunts keep saying, but a lot of disparate chapters, I think.
Oh, I know. I think there'd be a lot of interest in reading some of those stories, especially how they converge. You talk, let's go back to drum corps a little bit. You talk about the broadcast, and just in the few short broadcasts you talked about, we see how that evolved, just the way that it's done from a 5-hour live finals broadcast, and where you're outside in the bleachers, to what we've come to experience in the past few years, where yes, there were pieces of it that were live, maybe, a couple hours, but not all of finals, maybe, the top 12, to some on PBS, on ESPN for a few years, and moving into the cinema. So there's been this tremendous change in the media, the way that it's been delivered to folks. I'm curious about your incredibly unique perspective of how that activity has changed, and even marching band has kind of changed with it, maybe sometimes a few years behind it, because I know you've also worked with some marching bands along the way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's start with the broadcast proper, those 5 hours live on PBS. I mean, that was the bomb. That was great. There's nothing like live TV. You either get it right or it's a mistake going to Mars, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you get back on the horse and straighten it out and go from there. Then we ended up evolving into a 2-hour highlight show on PBS that at first the network put it out and mandated stations carry it Saturday night at 8 or whatever on the 13th of whatever. Mm-hmm. Then it became, okay, stations, here's the program. It's up to you when you want to run it, where you want to run it. And at that point, we started to lose some of the impact of the footprint. Gosh, I remember going to my aunt's house in Charlotte for Thanksgiving several years running, and it'd come on at 11 o'clock in the morning on the Charlotte PBS station on Saturday before Thanksgiving or Saturday after Thanksgiving, something like that. So that went on for a bit, and we began to wonder about, okay, can we find a more effective outlet? That's when the deal with ESPN started to percolate. And I should say, while all this is evolving, the theater thing started up. This is year 17, which is amazing to me, of our theater partnership. So that was starting up simultaneously, which was pretty darn exciting. We did the ESPN thing. That was for about 3 years. That, and some of your band director viewers here can identify with this, that got to be really sticky for DCI because of the incredible cost of the performance rights fees. Yeah. PBS had a blanket music license. We're good to go. ESPN had no such thing. So DCI is now footing the bill for all this licensing. It got incredibly complicated. We didn't know if we were going to get clearance for this song from Core X until 3 days before the show. And we're waiting, they want their final edit. So that got really, really bulky and cumbersome. And after that contract ended, then we went exclusively into the theaters.
Can I ask you an ESPN question? I hate to interrupt you, but so those ESPN broadcasts had a different tone to them. It was sport. It was branded as sport, but it was quicker. It was not that we're not going to see the full length of anything because 12 minutes must be too long for that viewership. I mean, what was that like for all of you who came from doing DCI all of those years to, okay, we're changing our focus to compressing it, and it's sport?
Well, that sport transition really kind of started during an Olympic year back in the PBS times. Kurt Gowdy co-hosted with me for several years, one of the iconic names and voices in sports broadcasting. And we became the Summer Music Games at that point, because we've struggled, initially when I got into this, we were trying to legitimize ourselves musically. Because back then, a band director said, hey, don't go do that thing. It'll ruin your embouchure. Ah, man, that's not music. That's, you learn everything by rote. Oh, I used to have some great go-arounds back up home as a kid. So we're trying to legitimize ourselves as a music performance organization. Then we try to legitimize ourselves as an art form. I did the show for a couple of years running with Dr. Charles Webb, the Dean of Music at Indiana University. Charles was blown away. I remember he saw Santa Clara and said, it's like an opera on the football field. So we were proving our chops in that arena and getting much more acceptance in the wider music community. It's been a struggle and an evolution. So then comes the competitive part, which, you know, that's been an age-old argument. Marching band, drum corps, chorus, whatever. Hey, we're here to make music. We're here to make art, not compete. Well, guess what? The competition's the exciting part. The competition is part of the motivation. And if you're trying to make money to perpetuate an activity, that's what keeps the fans interested. So then we became Summer Music Games, and Marching Music's Major League became the marketing hook. So that began evolving in the PBS years. Now we get to ESPN, and of course, yeah, got to do, you know, action-packed, faster, quicker, shorter cuts, snappier features. And thankfully, Tom Blair was the producer director at the helm through all that and through the transition. So he had a handle on it. Me coming from the background I came from, easy stuff. We would sit, and this is part of how the sausage is made that people might not get. He would have this show cut together, and very little of what Dennis and I had done in the broadcast booth would end up in the final cut. We would go to an audio studio in Chicago, and Tom would say, okay, here's the transition from the Cavaliers to the Bluecoats. I've got 12 seconds of talk time for you. You're in the booth. You're excited. Make it happen. Here we go.
Wow.
And we had to get it into 12 seconds and make it seamless. So it worked. Then we go to the theater thing, and it has now evolved into a 15-core live show that is a Thursday night. And that was part of the compromise deal with the theaters, because we started out saying, hey, let's do the finals. No, we're not going to give up theater seats on a Saturday night. But if you want to do it on a weeknight, we might be able to come up with something, because that's not a big movie going night. So that's how we ended up doing the prelims Thursday night, live in movie theaters.
So, and, you know, I've been to some of those live ones in the movie theaters, and, you know, you talk about the anxiety. I remember one where there were thunderstorms moving through in Indianapolis, and the screen goes black in the theater. And just this kind of sheer panic in the room of what happened. It was, you know, but there was this tremendous camaraderie, I think, of drum corps fans that in our area then that grew out of that. I just love that. That was another community moment of what drum corps is.
Yeah, and it's gotten much more reliable in these days of fiber optic cable. We don't have to worry about rain feint so much. But there are days, you know, I'll go IMC Carolina Crown Show every year down at Wake Forest University in the great outdoors. It's usually the day after DCI South. So I managed to get upstairs where I can hear everything in the great outside. And I was like, oh man, and that's a beautiful stadium for that. And then I'll go to Lucas Oil Stadium, and I'm indoors. You become accustomed to it. And our spot in the broadcast booth is probably the best for audio pickup in there. But there are times when I say, oh God, I just want to hear this in a big open outdoor stadium, but then a thunderstorm will roll through and it's like, oh, thank you, Lord. We got the roof closed and we're don't have to worry about that. And that's been more than a few occasions. So that's part of the trade-off.
That's right. You know, it's interesting. I think I've only been to DCI finals in Lucas Oil Stadium once or twice, but I've been to Grand Nationals for Bands of America pretty much every year for the past 10 or so years. And it's been fascinating to watch those bands come in and watch and you know, talk to some of their staff about how they are so programming and designing their show for those potential 3 runs at you know, during Grand Nationals. And that might be doable for a marching band who might have a different Friday night show and a different Saturday night show, you know, football show versus a competitive show. But for drum corps, that's a little bit harder, because in a normal season, you're outdoors most of the season in the elements. And then yes, you're inside sometime, but you're not, I would imagine it'd be much harder to program your show to finals night.
Well, you stop and think about it, though. We're DCI Southeast in Atlanta in that Mercedes-Benz Dome.
It's true.
San Antonio, inside the Alamo Dome. Really, Allentown is still the only major contest that's in the great outdoors. The smaller shows, yeah, you're outside. You're also lower press boxes, smaller stands. So it's going to be different anyway. But they're still aiming for that last week in August. I mean, that's what everything is designed for and intended for, and it just amazes me how much those shows will change in the week before they get in that stadium. They're constantly adding things and tweaking things and changing it up. And of course, the audio mix is a beast. But thankfully, they're getting better about cutting down on some of the overdrive with the amplification.
Right.
They're getting that mix much better.
Right. Well, that's one of the big changes over the years. I mean, the instruments they play is another one of the major changes. But I'm curious from your perspective of sitting that high for all of those years and seeing the finals, looking back into the 70s and into the early 80s and just what we were talking about now, how, yeah, they're still aiming for that last Saturday night in August. That week's really important. Was that so much the focus in the 70s and 80s?
No. As we were coming up, of course, one of our big deals was winning the New York State Championship. I could also take the Corps to the US Open, or in Marion, Ohio, or the World Open in Boston, Lynn, Massachusetts, or the American International Open in Butler, Pennsylvania. There were more shows, more titles to shoot for, and state championships meant a lot more because there were a lot more drum corps scratching for that title. Eventually, the activity shifted, and the Legion and the VFW kind of marginalized themselves out of the mainstream, and the corps took their direction basically into their own hands with the advent of Drum Corps International, and that then became the bellwether event, and then all the regionals along the way. So it still means something to grab one of those regional titles before you get to the championship week. But that's the gold ring. That's the one. You want your name on that Founders Trophy.
Right. I could talk to you about this part of the Drum Corps history for hours, but I want to move on to switch topics slightly here for a second to this Pennsylvania connection that you have here in recent years.
Wings up.
That's right, exactly right. And for folks who don't know what that means, Steve is a recent graduate of Clarion University, fellow alum. I am a Clarion grad, communication major. So you went back for, I guess the plan was to do this all online and end up in person in Clarion at the end of it, but COVID changed all that. I have so many questions here, but I think I'd rather just say to you, so what did you go back for, and why did you choose to do that, and why Clarion?
Well, why did I go back? Number one, would have been back around 2010, 2011, just after the recession had hit. I was looking. At that point, I was with a TV station that was not in a good way. The recession hammered them bad. They offered me a generous 40% pay cut to stay on in my current position, or take on about 3 other jobs for the same pay, which would have led to one of those mid 50-year-old heart attacks that we read about. So I was not real fan of that. Started looking at teaching jobs because I taught as an adjunct at 3 different universities back in the late 70s, early 80s. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I had a couple good years at Florida International when I was in Miami. And I start knocking on doors and looking around and thinking, man, even if I could do this full time, I'd love it. Because one of the best experiences I had in the pre-recession job in Wilmington was working with the young reporters fresh out of school. God, I loved those kids. Were so bright and so motivated, and so appreciative of somebody taking the time with some experience with them to help them tweak their game. Anyway, I started looking, and a couple places said, man, we'd love to hire you based on your credentials, but things have changed. You got to have that master's degree before we can even look at you, before we can even consider you. Well, shucks. So I started looking for master's programs. I had one fault. Well, I had a false start in Miami way back, but then I had another false start online. And then I found Clarion's that had a lot of flexibility to it. The actual degree titled Mass Media Arts and Journalism. So, okay, that's in my wheelhouse. They offered a certification in public relations, which I was really interested in at that point. There go the dogs. Must be Mrs. Rondinaro's home. So hang on a sec. This is live, folks. Okay, go on. Go meet your mother. Get out of here. Okay. Anybody doubt it was live? Now they know.
It's not a Zoom without a cat or a dog.
Exactly. Yeah. So Clarion's program was really flexible, and I appreciated that. The other twist was my company, Cook Group, which is another drum corps connection. Remind me to get back to that so I don't digress too far. Had a tuition reimbursement program, but it worked out that it would cover a class per semester. So it was going to be a slow roll, but that's okay. I wasn't up for more than one class with all the other duties. And we made it work. I ended up with a wonderful advisor named Dr. Lacey Fulton, who runs a department now, and just plodded along and got that bloody master's at age 66. My wife said, what are you going to do with that? I said, I don't know. Maybe it'll look good in my obituary. She said, not if I don't choose to put it there. So I better get my own obituary pre-written.
Oh, and then you delivered a virtual commencement address.
Yeah. They had put out a kind of a request to anybody interested in doing it. And I said, well, I got pretty good storyline here if you want to hear from an old goat. So I'm willing, and put that up there. I hope some of those youngsters could pick up something from a life reasonably well lived.
Yeah, so it's out there on YouTube, so you can.
I really I hated that I couldn't get up there, because we had a great capstone project worked out where I'd come and I'd spend a week and work with the undergrads and all these different things, and COVID just blew that right out of the water. So we came up with an alternative, but I still need to get through there someday.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, and that's fascinating to me, because that, that building, Becker Hall, the communication building, was where I practically lived 4 years, doing television and radio out of TV5 and WCUC FM. So yeah, I hope you can get there at some point and see what it's like and see the campus.
Well, it's funny to put a resume together for something, because I'll put master's degree 2020, and then I'll put Bachelor of Arts SUNY Geneseo 1976. What's for this guy?
Let's go back drum corps talk. So what's the Cook Group connection?
Okay, so 1979, my first year to do the broadcast. This kid brings that videotape to his dad and says, hey, this is pretty cool. My band director showed this to me in school. You need to watch this, Dad. Dad said, okay. Dad watches it. Dad says, whoa, this is pretty cool. Son goes off and marches a season with the Colts, comes back, as the dad said, changed for the better. And he said, we need one of these drum corps for our own kids here in Bloomington, Indiana. Guy's name was Bill Cook, multi-billionaire. Bill takes $1 million of his own money, starts Star of Indiana in Bloomington. The rest is a fabled piece of drum corps history, but they went on to become world champs. And then he turned it into the stage show Blast, which won a Tony on Broadway, and still tours internationally today. Bill became a dear friend and mentor along the way. So, 2006, I think he gets into historic preservation, sees this old hotel in West Baden, Indiana, that's a National Historic Landmark with this magnificent dome, and it's vacant and falling in on itself. So he commits to saving it. From that is born French Lick Resort, some $500 million plus later. And it's an amazing historic reclamation project. It's a resort. It's wholly owned by the Cook Company, which is a biomedical device company. That's where Bill made his initial money. So that stretch after the recession, I'm looking, and Bill said, "Did you ever think about French Lick?" And I said, "No, but if you think I should think about French Lick, I will." And off I went in marketing there for 10 years. And that tuition subsidy was how I was able to fund my master's at Clarion.
And
Bill,
it looks like you had fun doing it at French Lick.
great fun. They had no video operation when I got there, so I got to create it freehand. So yeah, I love telling the stories. I still work for them part-time remote, and we do our best to tell interesting historic stories. There's a history there.
I just love this trajectory of your career. I just love how things
It's all over the road.
but things happened, and it was just the right turning point for you. It sure seems that way.
I've been lucky. I've been blessed. We came close. People don't know how close we came to losing DCI financially a few years ago. And the board made the best decision I think that board has ever made in putting Dan Atchison in there as the executive director. And Dan has done a marvelous job and become a dear trusted friend. You talk about trajectory. I don't think we'd have a DCI if he hadn't been put in that job. And we work wonderfully well together with high level of mutual respect. And we're going to come out of this COVID thing, by gosh. It's going to still be a challenge, but we're going to get something out there this year. And then next year is our 50th anniversary. That is just crazy to think that we're hoping to be able to do that up big.
Let's talk about coming out of COVID and what, so we have some drum corps happening. We have some DCI happening this summer, and even kind of starting here in a few days in the theaters, but give us the preview of what we can expect from DCI this summer.
Well, let me look at the calendar, make sure I got my date right. Saturday, July 10th, I'm going over to Boiling Springs, Gardner-Webb University, and help Carolina Crown put their production out live online. They're not going to be able to make the trip to Indy, but they've been working away and rehearsing, and I'm told it's a pretty cool program they're going to put out. So after that, I'll head up to Indiana Wesleyan University, where the Bluecoats are in camp, and that's going to be the origination point for the 2-hour cinema show that we'll be doing with Fathom Events on the night of the 15th. That's a Thursday, starts at 8 o'clock. We're going to showcase some great past performances from corps, and also show some segments from around the country of what different corps are doing to get ready for Indy, and also do some stuff live with the Bluecoats, who will be there rehearsing, really to set the table. And then the corps themselves have a mini tour. Nothing is going to be competitive this year, which I love that idea. The corps are free to concoct, free to invent, free to entertain. They don't have to meet any judging criteria. I'm really anxious to see what they come up with, but they've got a mini tour that's pretty regional in nature that will ultimately get them to Indy for what typically would have been championship week, but instead it'll be a week of celebration, 3 nights of performances, just like a regular championship week. But just getting it back on the road. In fact, I'm supposed to have a meeting with Dan here in a day or two to look at the agendas, and it's going to be a lot of special things interspersed between the core performances each night to make it special and unique. But they really, and as competitive as this activity is, and this guy wants to beat the other guy. I don't care what they say about, oh no, we're all in this together. No, that guy wants to beat that guy on Saturday night. These directors have worked together so closely and so well to get DCI through this, and then to put this abbreviated season and Indy event together that is really a testament to the organizations, the corps, as well as Drum Corps International. So I'm excited just to, see old friends and see and hear some drum corps. Somebody put up a clip of the Caballeros Alumni Corps coming down the street on Memorial Day in New Jersey playing a street beat, and I got goosebumps a mile high. Oh, I missed this. I need this. So
Yeah.
I am really, really looking forward to having some drum corps in my face.
And I'll tell you, I love that you're going to be telling some of the stories, because as I look back at the PBS broadcasts, that was my favorite piece. I love those behind the scenes stories. And so to hear that you're doing it from the Bluecoats camp, and, you know, we're going to get kind of a peek into that. I love that angle.
Yeah, the vignettes, we love doing those. Quite honestly, those had to go away because of cost concerns. You know, cost money to go out and get a crew on location and shoot these things and put them together. And then, of course, we're trying to put more drum corps action in there, so it becomes pretty compressed. But that's what we're looking forward to with the 50th. Normally, I'm confined with broadcast duties, and I'll be doing a lot of the on-field announcing for this, and it'll be carried live by Flow Marching from Indy in August. But during the day, we're going to be running around with a crew and just coming up with pieces and parts for the 50th. There's a lot of stories to be told, but we've lost some, you know, some of the people who made it possible. It's kind of scary when you get to this point in life and your colleagues are beginning to pass and you think, hey, I'm becoming the old guard. I don't know if I like this.
But you know what? I just love that you're still combining those two passions that we talked about initially back when you're doing radio, and you're talking about drum corps, and here you are still getting excited to go tell visual stories about drum corps. I love it.
All it takes is 60 well-trained brass players coming at you full on, playing some beautifully orchestrated. I think the goosebumps right now. Oh man, that's all the motivation you need. There have been years that I've sat in that press box, and well, Dennis DeLucia is one of my dearest friends in the world from all the years we've worked together on broadcasts, and he cries more than I do. But there are moments when some of those sounds just bring us to tears. I'll admit to that. Phantom Regiment, Carolina Crown, Santa Clara, some of those things are just moments, cathartic, emotional moments. Goosebumps, you know, I have the Rondo goosebump meter that we use on the broadcast as well. It's in fact, I've joked with corps. I said, you know, go play all that crazy symphonic wind ensemble music that you feel you have to play to get the scores, but just let me love you for a couple of spots in that show.
Yeah.
Let me just love you for who you are.
Yeah.
And they've done a pretty good job of balancing that.
Yeah, I always put it as the moment. What was the what was that the moment? You know, and I love the experience of being with somebody who has never been to a drum corps show. And that first time when you know what is this? And then that they get that goosebump moment. That's the incredible piece for me.
And I got to do that with Maynard and Rita Moreno. I mean, yeah, Rita was totally gassed. I have lamented and asked, I said, how can we get her back just as a guest? I mean, if she's 90 now or she's close, but she's still doing stuff. And I'd love her to see it now, all these years later, to see how it changed. But what a thrill to introduce her to drum corps and people like that over the years.
Absolutely. Well, it's just your career again. It just to me is absolutely incredible, and I know you say much of it is full of luck and being at the right place, but much of it is also credit to your talent and skill and passion. And as a drum corps and marching band fan, I thank you greatly for what you have given to the activity.
Well, it's been a labor of, I can't even call it a labor. Don't tell anybody, but I probably do it all for free. I constantly say it. I believe it. I'm one of the luckiest guys around to be able to do what I do. And I've told Dan Atchison that, sorry, but you're going to have to take that DCI mic out of my cold hand after I pass, because I'm not giving it up willingly.
Well, Steve, it has been wonderful to talk drum corps and television with you, and especially with a fellow Clarion alum It has been great to chat. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
This was great fun.
And
see you. There go the dogs again. It's the alarm system. Hope to see you at a drum corps show.
Absolutely. And to all of you, thank you for joining us on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. We'll see you next time.